Okay, I do believe we are live. Welcome to another Eurorack Patch Lab. For those of you who are catching this on the replay, thanks for joining me. This is going to be a super casual patch session today. We're going to hang out. We're going to check out what I've got in the system right now. And in a few minutes, we're going to pull all of these cables and we're going to attempt to patch something from scratch today. I'm a little bit nervous as usual. And the first thing we're going to do is try to find the stream on my channel so that I can chat if anyone tunes in. Let's go ahead and check out the patch that I've got loaded in the system now. Hey, what's happening, Grant? What's happening, Tony? Thanks for joining up, guys. Sounds good and clear. All right. Looks like my stream is coming through okay on this side. I hope there's no stuttering in the audio today. This is a patch that I started working on yesterday. Hey, what's happening, Gaz? Thanks for joining in. Hey, what's happening? What's happening, Sean? We got Archiver Ma. Sounds good. This is Brett. What's happening, Brett? What's happening, Ed? Thanks for tuning in, everyone. I appreciate you being here. Can you hear my voice over the music? In my headphones, my voice is maybe a little quiet, but every time I watch these streams back, I feel like my voice is a little loud. So let me know if I need to adjust some levels. It's good. All right, level's good. Can hear fine. Thanks, Walt. Thanks, everybody. Thanks for joining me. Redneck Samurai. We got that guy Smitty. Thanks for joining up. 12 people in the chat already. Appreciate you guys being here with me today. We're trying something a little bit new today. Today, I'm going to be what I'm, considering to be all in. And what that means is that everything that we're doing today is happening within the Eurorack system. If you have tuned in to some of my previous Eurorack live streams, you might remember that I've been running the system using the Digitact as the master clock for the system, and also as a way to control quite a few of the samples in the system. But I got a new module in this week from Mazatron, and it's a clock divider module. And earlier this week, I tried an experiment where I took the Digitact out of the equation, and I tried to create a patch using the clock divider from Mazatron as my master clock, and using that to kind of send the clock signals around the case. And I was able to develop sort of a patch, like a magic patch, and I realized about like an hour into the session that I had literally just been sort of jamming and ebbing and flowing in the system on this patch and just moving and evolving. And it was really a completely different state of mind and of jamming than really I have maybe been in before. For those of you who are live jammers and music geeks, that might make a little more sense to you. And so what I did was I literally tried to recreate that and tried to create another patch using just the system and no Digitact at all. So no extra samples from the Digitact, no extra sequencing from the Digitact. And I was able to create a really awesome patch again. Unfortunately, attempt number 3 on that this week was kind of a debacle. And so this is attempt number 4 at that. No digitact. Excuse me. And everything that we're hearing is being generated from modules in the case. All of the sequencing and all of the sounds. This patch here is using some chord stabs samples that I've loaded into the Squarp Ramble sample player, and I'm triggering those back in sort of a random fashion using the branches module from Mutable Instruments. And what this does is every time I trigger this module, it does sort of a virtual coin toss. And if the coin comes up heads, it spits that trigger out of one output. And if the coin, the virtual coin toss comes up tails, it spits the trigger signal out of a separate output. And I'm using this module to trigger the chord stabs. And if you listen really closely, the chords are triggering the same samples, but they're triggering in a different fashion all the time. It's not a static repeating loop. It's kind of an evolving pattern in the chord samples. Go ahead and mute a lot of the other elements so we can just listen to the chords and the bass line for a moment. Yeah, hit that like, guys. It really helps the channel, and it really helps YouTube to share the stream as well. Thanks, Tony. Okay, get rid of this awesome clap for a second so we can focus in on this bass line. Really driving, groovy bass line that I sort of stumbled across. We're using, to create the bass sound itself, we're using a module from Blue Lantern Modules. And what it is it's their version of a braids module. It's from Mutable Instruments. It's got a different firmware in it so that a few of the algorithms are a little bit different from the braids module that I've got from Mutable Instruments. And it's kind of like, I don't know, it really appeals to me. It's kind of got like a cyberpunk aesthetic. We're going to be doing some videos specifically on this module in the next coming weeks. I've got a new skiff here that I'm going to be using to do some real specific videos on modules as we continue exploring Eurorack on my channel. But listen to that tone of this bass. We can kind of bring it down to just one layer. And we can kind of bring another octave over that bass. It's a really thick sound. I've also got a new trick on the kick drum this week that I'll share with you now. We're using the Bifaco Kick All module to get the kick drum. And there's some CV inputs on this module where you can assign a CV input to like the shape of the waveform that's making the kick drum between a sine and a square wave. You've got an envelope input for the decay. But what I've done is I've run a CV input to the tuning input. And I'm taking a module from Blue Lantern Modules called Assist. And that's literally what it is doing for me. It is assisting me to help create a more tighter and punchy kick drum. Now listen carefully, and I'm going to remove what the Assist module is doing from our kick drum. Do you hear how the kick drum, let's see here. Do you hear how the kick drum gets a little flabby? We're soloing just the kick drum now. But when I add in this tiny little bit of an envelope to the tuning of the oscillator, listen to what this does to the sound. We get that tiny bit more punch on the very beginning transient of the kick drum. This probably isn't the best, you know, if you're listening on your phone, you might want to put your headphones on. But listen to what I can do with the punch of that kick drum as I adjust the amount of envelope that we're sending to this. I can really get that click, that pop on the transient on the front of the kick drum, really bright, or we can keep it really dark down here. But by adjusting the envelope on the Blue Lantern module's assist module, we can really get that tiny little bit of extra something happening in the kick drum. And we start to get a groove going. Hey, Redneck Samurai, there's no compressors. I don't have any compression happening. I don't have any compression. I don't have any limiters. I did quite a robust search through Modular Grid to find a limiter that would act sort of the way that I would expect a limiter to act, that I could use kind of like as a finalizer for my system to help maybe boost the overall volume of all of this, but use that limiter to keep everything in check and from going over to 0 decibel. But to this point, I haven't really found a limiter module that seems to do just that. When I'm producing in Ableton, I like to use the Waves L2 Ultra Maximizer plugin. If anybody wants to make a module that sort of acts like that, I'd really rock my world. But yeah, no compression. There's no sidechain compression, there's no standard compression, and there's no limiting. So it's definitely sort of a wrestling match as you go to keep all of your levels in line and in check. In just a few minutes, we're going to pull all of these cables and try to patch something up from scratch today. I don't know exactly what it'll be, but I know it's going to have a 4 on the floor rhythm today. Hey, 14 people on the chat. Thanks for joining me. One of the things that not having a Digitact in the setup means, one of the things that entails, is that I no longer have a start and stop per se. Once I get these modules going, everything is just sort of rolling, so I don't necessarily have any way to like stop, and then we're hearing less volume. So I'm going to be doing a little bit more fading in and fading out of the master volume so that we can chat as we're building today than normal, because I don't have the ability to start and stop the Digitact like I normally would. But I think what we're going to do, I think we'll go ahead and pull these cables at this time. And while I'm doing that, so it's not super boring just to hang out and watch me pull a bunch of cables, I figured we'll go ahead and listen to one of my live jams on the YouTube channel. This is a jam I did, I don't know, I think last year or so. And it's sort of a collab slash remix that I did of a track from Pyro the Acid Clown. Mark the Acid Clown Gardner, good friend of mine. With you guys.
Electronic sounds audio.
I hope you can hear that and that it's not too loud. All right, cool. So here's this, something to keep us, you know, something to listen to. And I am gonna go ahead and begin pulling some cables. Thank you all for joining me today. For those of you who know me for the chilled music and for the dub, I also do other stuff as well, like techno and acid breaks and drum and bass and jungle and if you're just tuning in, stick around. We're about to make a patch from scratch in the system. For those of you who don't know, I really like to mix it up and do as many different genres, tempos, and styles as I can possibly achieve. It's a lot of work, but I don't really have other hobbies. This kind of stuff is what I'm about. Love those halftime big beat grooves with big, huge drums and the snare hitting maybe a decibel or two too loud. That's my bag. If you're just tuning in, thanks for joining me today. We're about to do a patch from scratch in the Eurorack system. Getting close. All right. Adjusting some of these knobs here to get kind of back to some sort of a zero position per se. Okay. Thanks, Tony. All right. Let's patch something. Let's get some 4 on the floor music happening. All right. Let's see here. For those of you who might not be familiar with what I'm doing here in Ableton, I've got the main audio system, the main audio signal, from the system fed into my main mixer behind the camera, and we're taking a headphone out from the main mixer into my audio interface, which is connected to my Mac here, and we're running the audio into Ableton so that I can use a couple of visualizer plugins to kind of help me see what I'm hearing. It helps a lot when I'm working on headphones to kind of keep my bass in line and my high frequency content in line as well. I did make some notes as to what I would like to do today, and so we're gonna attempt to kind of maybe go through some of these so that I don't forget some of the cool stuff that we're gonna do. 17 people, all right. Thanks for joining me. Illusion, finally catching the live stream. All right, well, welcome. This is just going to be a super casual patching session. I'm relatively new to all of this Eurorack stuff and hardware, so I figured that this is a really great way to start sharing the experience and the journey with you guys so that you can see all of the stuff that's involved. And hopefully I'm trying to get a little bit better each week as well. Let's go ahead and start today. Let's start today we're going to be using the Mazatron clock divider as our main clock today. And we're going to take a clock signal out of that module and we're going to patch it into a multiple. And the multiple will allow me to send that clock signal all throughout the system to any of the other sequencer modules that need a clock signal. So, let's start by tuning this module here if we can, and hopefully we'll be able to. I'd like to tune this to a C. That last groove was in F minor, which is my favorite key to write in. But today I've collected some samples in the Squarp Rample, including some chord samples that we're going to try to use, and these are in the key of C minor. So we're going to try to get all tuned to C minor today. I'm using the Platts module here. And what we're going to do, whoops, that's the wrong knob, rather. I want to do this, and sometimes I have a bit of a hard time tuning this module, and hopefully today won't be super difficult. Sorry for the delay getting it going, guys. Please bear with me. The thing about this module is that a lot of oscillators have a coarse tune knob and also a fine tune knob, which makes it really easy to fine tune the oscillator and get it exactly where you need it to be pitch-wise. But the Platts module, as far as I can tell, only has a coarse tune, which makes it a little bit more difficult for me to actually tune this module. And what we're going to do is we're going to trigger a chord sample. And we're going to use the Mazatron clock divider to achieve this. If I divide our tempo, our main clock, let's go ahead and get a little rhythm going for us to write to first. And we're going to take a division of our main clock is basically, if you think of 16th notes, if you divide 16th notes by 4, you're going to get quarter notes. So if I take a divided by 4 clock signal and we patch that into the input of our kick drum, we're going to start triggering a 4 on the floor kick drum. What I need to do is I'd like to use the accent module again so that we can get a little bit more of a robust kick drum. So I'm going to run this module into the tuning input again. And what we need is a longer cable. What we need is a way now to trigger the envelope on the assist module so that it's in time with the kick drum. So what we'll do is we're going to actually duplicate our divided by 4 clock using my multiple again. This is the 07 mult from Synth Rotec, I believe, and it allows me to either plug one input and take that out 14 different times, or it'll allow me to plug in up to 4 different inputs and then divide those out by like 3 each. So we're going to take our divided by 4 clock signal, we're going to send that to the kick drum, and we're also going to send that to the envelope so we can trigger the envelope. Cool. And now we just need a way to hear the kick drum. So I'm going to route that into the mixer. Almost there. And thank you for your patience. So the cool thing about this kick-all module from Bifaco is I can do all sorts of tuning and adjusting with it in real time. Let's go ahead and get us kind of a mellow kick today. Hope that sounds okay at home there. And also, I'm going to adjust the tempo. And we're going to go a little bit slower to start off with today. Cool. Let's go ahead and put a little bit of hi-hats to this, so we have a little bit of a rhythm to work with the first chord stab that we're going to put in. We're going to go ahead and get a Euclidean sequencer going by sending it a clock signal from our main clock. One of the things that's interesting about routing this way in the case, in the system, not using the Digitact, is that the Digitact was providing me a really easy way to create a start and stop signal, like a reset signal, that would allow all of the sequencers to know when the downbeat was and be in sync with each other. But I don't really know how to achieve that exactly yet without the Digitact. So this creates kind of a more, I don't know, natural, flowing, and evolving kind of a jam. And you'll hopefully hear that as we continue setting this up today. But one of the interesting things about that is when I turn the system off and turn it back on again, everything will be out of sync completely because there was no reset signal. So it's almost an experience of Zen where you're like doing all this patching and then turning it off and just letting it all go. Let's go ahead and get some hi-hats happening here. Really appreciate everyone joining up today for the stream. We're using a Euclidean sequencer from 2HP to trigger some hi-hats. We're going to go ahead and route these to the mixer so we can hear them. Cool. Let's see. Just something really basic for us to start writing to today. I'm going to mute those hi-hats and check on the panning of this kick drum. We look fine. Cool. Just a little bit of a rhythm for us to start adding some other sounds to. Let's go ahead and start triggering this chord stab that we were talking about just a moment ago. If I take, let's see here, if I take the master clock and I take like a divided by 64 signal, basically what this is going to do is it's going to create a trigger for me every downbeat on every 4 bars. And I'll show a little bit longer cable here, and I'll show you what I mean by that. Please excuse me as I dig around through these cables. Let's see here. And then we just need a way to hear this back, so out. Let's see here. Let's route this into this mixer right here, and then let's go ahead and route this mixer. Let's see, this is a chord. Might be really cool if we routed this into the reverb module. I have a Desmodus Versio reverb from Noise Engineering. This is my only reverb module in the system so far. It is really fantastic. And let's go ahead and route the chord that we're creating in the Platts module through this reverb, and you'll hear that in just a moment. We just need a way to route. We're going to have a little mixer next to my reverb that allows me to route multiple things into the Desmodus Versio reverb. So I'm plugging that mixer into the reverb. And now all we have to do is just plug the reverb into my mixer, and we should start hearing this. Here we go. Do some adjusting. 2, 3, and yeah. Okay, so let's count this out so that you can hear what I'm talking about. This is kind of establishing a downbeat, this chord. 1, 2, 3, 4, 2, 2, 3, 4, 3, 2, 3, 4, 4, 2, 3, 4. Okay, so we've now sort of, even though we don't have a reset, we've sort of created a sound that gives us a sense as to when the downbeat is. And it's sort of a static sound. I mean, it sounds the same every time we trigger it. And that gets a little boring really quickly. So let's go ahead and assign some modulation to this chord so that we get a little bit of movement in the sound right off the jump. Let's use an LFO for this, like a slow moving triangle LFO. I've got the Oct module from DivKit here, which is basically 8 triangle wave LFOs, and they are not synced to tempo, so that when using these LFOs, you can get kind of a more, I don't know, like humanistic, I can't think of the word I'm trying to come up with, but a less synchronized sort of vibe. And what we're going to do is we're going to run this LFO into the IntelliGel Quadrat Attenuator, which allows me to take the full width, I guess it's a triangle LFO, takes the full width of that LFO, and I can make it a lot smaller so that we can adjust the amount of modulation that's happening to this chord stab. You'll hear what I'm talking about in just one moment. Here we go. I'm going to route this into the Harmonics CV, or rather the Morph CV on the plates module, and we're going to listen really close to this chord stab. And it's going to start very subtly evolving, and when it hits, it'll be a little bit different sounding every time it hits. "17 people, all right. Thanks for joining me, everyone. We can use the Desmoda's Versio reverb to get a lot of reverb on this if we want, and change up the vibe we're going for. I always say that changing the tempo and changing the amount of reverb you are using is really a great way to start changing the vibe of what you're working on. So do you hear how the reverb that is being created from this chord kind of hovers in the mix and almost gives us a pad sound, like a melodic tone there? Let's go ahead and try to add in some other chord samples at this time. We're going to use another Euclidean sequencer. Or wait, let's go ahead and use the Mazatron Golden Shower sequencer to trigger the next set of chords. I've got some chords samples in the Squarp Rample sample player that I've got set up for us to use today, and they're tuned to the key of C minor. So let's see if we can get those in the mix here. We're going to go ahead and send our main clock signal to a Euclidean sequencer and see what we can get going. Take an out from that sequencer into the gate input of the Rample, and then we just need, let's see here, way to hear this back. Let's try this one today. That's cool, and we're definitely in key, but this chord is very long. Let's see here. And what I would like is it's kind of just real busy in the mix, and it's kind of soaking up a lot of the available frequency range. And what we can do is if we turn that hi-hat down, if we run this chord stab into an envelope, we can get control over how long the chord is ringing out for. So what we're going to do to make that happen is, instead of running it directly into the mixer, we're going to go ahead and run it into an envelope. And we're going to use the envelopes that defeated me last week, and I got it this time. This is the Javelin envelope by WMD Devices. And check this out as we get this set up, and you hear exactly what I am talking about. I'm going to run it out from this, back into the input here. And what we need is we need a gate signal to trigger the envelope. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to duplicate the signal that we're creating with the Euclidean sequencer. I'm going to send that both to trigger the chord and to trigger the envelope. And I'm going to use a splitter cable for this. It's difficult to breathe with this mic right here. Let's see here, to the gate in. We're going to run one to the gate input of the envelope and one to the gate input of the sample itself. And look, I'm using the envelope this time. So what we can do is we can really adjust. All right, I'm using this Euclidean sequencer, but I wanted to use this golden shower. Let's switch that out. I do want to use this. My cables are everywhere. Thank you for your patience with the cable mess on these streams, guys. We're going to use a different sequencer rather than a Euclidean sequencer. I really like the Masotron Golden Shower sequencer for being able to tweak patterns in real time, and that's what we're going to use today. So I'm going to get us a clock signal into this, and instead of running this from that Euclidean sequencer, we're going to go ahead and run this from the Masotron Golden Shower sequencer instead. And now, as I adjust the sequencer here, we can control the rhythm of these chords very easily and in real time. I can just roll this knob here and choose different rhythmic patterns on this sequencer. This is the Masotron Golden Shower sequencer. And then using the envelope, we can tighten this up if we want. Bring our hat back in. Some rhythms going. Okay. Get our chord back. So we have a downbeat. 2, 3, 4. 2, 2, 3, 4. 3, 2, 3, 4. 4, 2, 3. Here we go now. 2, 2, 3, 4. 3, 2, 3, 4, 4. Can you feel that rhythm at home now? Okay, so using this clock divider in a way is allowing me to sort of create that downbeat instead of having a reset signal that's creating it in the case. It's just sort of an audio sort of trigger now. 3, 4, 2, 3, 4, 2, 3. Feel it. And once you lock into that groove, it just sort of, it's easy to follow. You can start adjusting some stuff in real time on this hi-hat sound. All right. 2, 3, 4. Dibba, dibba, dibba. Cool. I have another chord in the Swarp Ramble that's also tuned to C minor. I'd also like to note real quick that the chord that's coming out of the Swarp Ramble, let me go ahead and solo that chord here. This chord here, that if you listen to it really closely, this chord is actually evolving. It's 9 different chord stabs. I took out my quasi-MIDI Sirius and I played a C minor chord and then turned the cutoff down 10. I then played a C minor chord and then turned the cutoff down 10 and then played a C minor chord. And I did that until I had 9 different chord stabs, each one with very slightly different filter settings. And that's what we're triggering in real time here. The Ramble is scrolling between these 9 different samples and creating a little. If it was just one sample, it would sound very static and again get boring really easily. But that's one of the benefits of using the Swarp Ramble and taking a little bit of time before your sessions to prepare the samples you want to work with creatively. Thanks for joining me, everyone. We're going to keep getting creative today. We're going to attempt to keep working with that ebb and flow through the session. I think what we'll do, actually, as the next step, is take this bump, 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 bump kind of chord line, and let's make a little bit of movement happen on that chord line. I see my levels on the mixer are a tiny bit low as well, so I'm going to boost that up for you guys real quick. Okay, I hope that sounds okay there at home. We're gonna get a little bit of modulation. Yeah, definitely. So let's see if we can't get these chords that are doing this rhythmic pattern to run through a filter before they hit the envelope. So what we're going to do is, instead of running these chords directly into the envelope, we're going to run them into a filter first. Saturation, frequency, modulation, input. And then we're going to take an output from the filter, and we're going to run that into the input of the envelope. All right. I've got some extra saturation currently on the filter. Let me take that off. Yeah, cool. Okay, cool. So I've turned down the chord that we're triggering from the Platts module so that we're only hearing the rhythmic sort of chord happening here. And I'm going to show you what the filter is doing here. You can kind of filter this up now. So now we have a little bit more control over what we can do with this chord sample. We can bring the envelope up on it. We can bring the envelope down on it, and we can filter it down. Kind of tuck it back in the mix, maybe bring some other elements to the top of the mix for a few, like this hi-hat that's pounding through so loud. Tighten that up a little bit. Bring in our first chord again so we can get our groove with the downbeat. Let's find it. 2, 3, 4, 2, 2, 3, 4, 3, 2, 3, 4, 4, 2, 3. Here's the downbeat. Okay. So I just want to stress that quite a bit during this session, that we're literally using the chord sound as a mental way to trigger when that downbeat is, so we know and we can keep in time as we're jamming and flowing. Let me open this hat for a few. Let's see. Bring this chord down a little. All right. I've got another sample that I've got in the Squarp Rample for us to hopefully get into this mix today, and that's a 909 ride sample. I'm a really big fan of using the 909 ride. I just love the way it sounds and the frequency that it brings to the top end of things that you're working with. So let's go ahead and figure out how we'd like to sequence this. Let's sequence this using the D&I Pro dot sequencer, which I've taken a little bit of extra time this week to try to get a little bit more familiar with how to actually use it. The first thing we'll need to do, as you know, when we want to use any sequencer, is we'll need to send a master clock to that sequencer. And that's why we're, got a multiple here, that I'm taking our master clock signal and I run that into a multiple so that I can take outputs from that multiple of our clock signal to any of the other sequencers in the system. So we're going to take the clock signal, our master clock signal, we're going to route that into the D&I Pro dot sequencer. And let's see if I can get a rhythm happening. Okay, we need a way to hear our sound back. So I'm going to plug an output from the sound into our mixer. We can hear what we're triggering. Ooh, this is coming out cool already. I might even just leave that rhythm. Hold the phone. One of the cool things also about the Squarp Rample sample player is it has some built-in effects, and one of them is a DJ filter, so I can maybe take a little bit of the low frequency content off of this new chord. Let's see if we can do that. Click filter and roll it up a little. Very subtly. Cool. And I'm doing that so that it doesn't have extraneous low frequency content that might interact with the bass that we're going to try to create or the kick drum that's already in the mix. So now we've got 3 different chord samples that are sort of playing off of each other. It's super important to have everything in tune, which is why I took that extra time in the beginning to tune the Platts module to a C. Hey, Mike, thanks for joining me. I appreciate you all being here with me on these patch sessions. This is a super way to keep me motivated and keep me, really trying to learn more and push the curve of what I'm doing with the Eurorack. I'm currently working on some pretty big plans, actually. Not only have I got this skiff for making some dedicated videos, but I'm really working on procuring a very large and very custom and very magic Eurorack case. And we'll see if that pans out. It looks like it's going to, I'm going to really be, it's a big finger cross on that right now. Another really neat feature about not using the Digitact, in that literally everything that we're creating is coming from the system itself in real time, is that I can literally roll the tempo at any time I want. So we can say, drop the kick drum. Maybe, maybe I'm jamming, right? Maybe I got an audience in front of me. Maybe I can see that they'd like to maybe pick up the tempo a little bit. So we can do that real slow here. And now, we've got a little bit faster of a groove going. Just tame that hi-hat a little bit. The interesting thing about this, though, is that it sort of becomes a more just sort of homogeneous feeling, you and this system. It's not like I'm punching in a specific number for this beats per minute, so I don't even really know what the tempo is here. And you sort of just have to go with that. And I know that sounds a little, hippy-dippy and all, just go with the vibes, man. But really, that's just what we're doing, is I'm trying to create like a vibe between me and machinery. And when you're setting up these patches and you're creating, choosing which modules that you'd like to patch things into, you're going to have somewhat of a muscle memory as to what's happening. And as we're creating all of these rhythms using sequencers that we can tweak in real time, and that we're running all of these things through modules that we're aware of what they do because we're patching it, it really creates an environment in which you can start doing that ebbing and flowing with your jams. And that's really what I'm trying to get into, learning more of how to achieve. Hey, thanks, Gaz. Okay, so let's see if we can't get this ride cymbal into the mix, guys. What we'll need is we'll need a way to sequence the ride cymbal. I'm going to use the .D&I Pro sequencer that's triggering our third chord sample, and I'm going to try to use this to create a rhythm for the ride. I don't need to send it a clock signal because it already has a clock signal. So all I need to do is just take an output from that sequencer into the gate input of the rample for the sample slot where my sample is. And now, all we need is just a way to hear that sample being played back from the rample. And we'll go ahead and plug that in, let's say here. And here's my 909 rhyme. Let's try to get this into the mix. Bring that down just a little bit, so it's kind of backing up the hat pattern and just giving us a little bit more high frequency content and rhythm. How's the sound? We're getting a little bit louder with this mix. Is it distorting or anything like that? Is everything sounding okay on your speakers or your headphones or your phone that you're listening on? Just let me know if I need to bring my level of the voice up or down, or maybe the music up or down, as we continue to build the groove and get louder. In fact, let's do some neat stuff. I've got a new module in this week as well that I'm trying to get a little more familiar with using. And it's specifically a module that I got for using for creating live performances, which is really what I'm about here with this system. And it's basically just 4 mutes from DivKit. It's the DivKit mutes module. So what we can do is we can literally take the CV input that's creating our ride pattern. And instead of running that CV triggers directly into the ride, I can run them into this mute module. And then if I take an output from the mute module and I run that into the gate input of what's controlling our ride, now I can turn the ride on and off using a switch. What am I doing wrong here? Here it is. No? Oh, come on now. Here we go. I'm on number 2, it looks like. This is a new module. I always have a little bit of time. There we go. Okay. So we can hear the ride, but I have a switch now. I can literally turn the ride on and off. 2, 3. Here we go. And so that's cool. Just a little bit of control that we can use to help with the ebb and flow of the groove we're creating. See if we can't remove a little bit of extra lows from this ride cymbal. Just get it back there gently. Cool. I wonder if we can get a bass line happening to this now that we've got so many other elements happening. I figure as long as we can get the bass line to be in the key of C minor, we should be golden, right? I had a pretty cool bass sound in this braids module for the last jam. Maybe we could use that same bass sound to create a new bass line. Sound is fine. Thank you very much. Yeah, when the Eurorack becomes a really big, complete instrument, let's talk about that for a moment, because that's one of the things that really sort of kept me at bay from entering into this sort of world for so many years. I'm 47, and just a few days actually, and this was sort of like a lifelong dream of mine that I always thought, you know, someday you might get into that, whatever. And I've watched people over the years with different systems, and I've watched so many videos on all of this and different people talking about different concepts and how they use it. And the way I see it, there's really, you know, a few different ways that you can go about creating a system. Some people go about and try to create like the world's best synthesizer, or what that means to them. You know, they want to have a 3 oscillator synthesizer, or maybe a 6 oscillator synthesizer. You know, the list goes on and on as far as what you could actually create. Other people, I think, want, you know, specifically to use the Eurorack effects and use those to process their guitar and their synthesizers and whatnot, and aren't really interested in creating melodics and their own content, but using the effects and being able to like modulate those effects in really unique ways using the sequencers in the Eurorack system. And then there are those of us who kind of just want the coolest groove box, and that's me. I want like to have access to samples. I want to have access to lots of different kinds of synthesis in real time. I'm interested in analog synthesis, wavetable synthesis, digital, I mean, you name it. And so that's what I've been trying to put together, is literally like my ideal groove box. I've got, you know, distortions, I've got filters, I've got multiple different ways to bring in my samples. We've got different oscillators to create different sort of, you know, waveforms, to create grooves. I've got sequencers for melodics, I've got sequencers for rhythmics, and I've got a couple of different ways to keep those melodics in key with each other. And that's what I'm really into, a really big custom groove box. Okay, this might be really difficult, so let's jump right in. Bassline time. I'll address that real quick, Redneck Samurai. Um, I, I, I I hesitate to talk about the cost of this kind of stuff because, as most of you know, this stuff is just ridiculously expensive. I'm not a rich person, but this is what I do for a living. I'm a sound designer. This also is kind of my only side passion and hobby. So, and I'm also a YouTuber. So basically, all of the levels in my life sort of revolve around music and electronic music gear in some way or another. Um, but this has definitely been like thank you Visa and thank you PayPal credit kind of a thing. These modules can be as low as around $100 a piece, and they can go up to $500 or $600 a piece for some of the more expensive and robust things like the mixer or the Squarp Rample sample player. Brand name has an influence on the prices, and that's typically based on build quality as well, based on my experiences so far. Um, yeah, this has kind of been like a lifelong dream of mine that I'm just finally committing to the investment of. But it is a very expensive proposition and not for everyone. And that's I definitely suggest that if you're interested in Eurorack in any way at all, to check out either VCV Rack on the desktop or My Rack on the iPad. Both absolutely wonderful pieces of software for getting your foot in the door and start learning how to actually patch some stuff up without having to do that lifelong investment. Yeah, exactly. My Rack. That's what got me into this. Without My Rack as sort of the gateway, I wouldn't have, there would certainly be none of this here. Okay, bassline time. We'll need a way. We'll need a way to sequence the bassline. So let's use the Sequence 8 sequencer from Synth Rotec to do this. Zero out all these steps here. The first thing we need when we're working with any sequencer is a clock signal. So I'm going to dig around for a cable here that will reach, and we're going to send our main clock signal over here into this case to get an input to this multiple. And now I can run outputs of our main clock signal to any of the modules in this case that we so desire. We'll take a clock signal and run it into this sequencer here. Right off the jump, we see that the playhead is kind of following along. Let's sort of see if I can manually sequence this with our downbeat. 3, 2, 3, 4, 4, 2, 3. Hit the reset. And I hit it at the same time as our chord sample there, which is our, downbeat that we discussed a few minutes ago. So we've got a sequencer. 1, 2, cool. What we need is we know what key we're in today because we're working with samples and because we've tuned the Platts module as well. So we know we're in the key of C minor. And we really want to stay in the key of C minor and keep our bass line in that key. So I'm going to run our melodic information into the Tenderfoot Electronics Quad Quantizer module today, which literally allows you to set the root note and the key. So I can literally set this to a C minor scale to help keep the bass in tune with the rest of our groove, provided that the oscillator itself is tuned to a C. And that's what I'm going to do at this point. Just right now it's tuned to an F because that's what my last groove was in. And I want to tune it to a C because that's what this groove is in. All right, we got good cooperation on the tuning today. Okay. Let's go ahead and program a bass line just on every 16th note for now. We're going to take our CV out from the sequencer. We're going to run that into the CV in of the quad quantizer. So we're sending the note information from our sequencer into the quad quantizer so that it can take that note information and quantize it to a scale for us. We're going to go ahead and take the trigger input, and we're going to trigger that via these 16th notes as well. So we've got 16th notes being fed into the quad quantizer module here, and it's quantizing those notes to the C minor scale. I can't stress that part enough. We're going to take the output of this, and we're going to patch that into the volt per octave input of the braids module over here. And now we just need a way to feed the braids module back into our system so we can hear it. Let's see here. How about this input here? Cool. All right. Okay, so what? Let's see here. Turn this down. Turn a bunch of stuff down. Cool. So what we're hearing now is just kind of a static note that's being fed out of this oscillator because I haven't set any note information up in our sequencer. But if I start moving some of these knobs, maybe bring our reverb down a little so we can hear this better. This is also a neat feature of this sequencer is that it has a complete random function. So I can literally hit the random knob, switch rather, and it will just play back the notes randomly. But what let's do is let's go ahead and get an envelope on this sound so that it's not just, a static, but rather we can hear the notes a little bit more individually and distinctly. Let's go ahead and feed the output of this module instead of directly into the mixer. We're going to feed this into an envelope. And we're going to use, what are we going to use? I moved some modules around this week to fit some extra stuff in the case. I'm a little out of sorts with where everything is. We're going to go ahead and use another Javelin envelope from WMD devices. So I'm going to take the wave output of the braids module into the input of this Javelin, and we're going to take an output of the Javelin into one more longer cable here into the input of our mixer so that we can hear it again. And now all we need is a way to trigger the gate, and we're going to trigger the gate the same way that we're triggering the actual sequence, just with our clock signal. And I don't need quite a long cable as that. And this way we're going to have notes on the bass line on all 16ths. But we're going to have access to the envelope now. Aha, so again, these modules beat me last week if you were here. I wanted to make sure I got both of them into the stream this week. So the WMD Javelin envelopes. That's Javelin 2, Dean 2. Ooh. All right, so we're using the Javelin envelope now. So I can control just how much of that little bass tone is coming through. Cool. And we're pretty much in key with the rest of the groove. See what we can do with this reverb. Maybe drown that reverb a bit more. Bring it up in the mix. Yeah. You guys know I like probably too much reverb, but it's kind of my bag. Hey, thanks, Tony. Hey, Steven. Thanks for joining me, everyone. This sounds pretty good. All right. No anomalies today. Everything that we have started to set up, we've been able to achieve. And I just want to stress, for those of you who tuned in, who missed the beginning, rather, and that's we're not using a digitact today as the master clock signal or as a way to sequence anything. Today we're all in. Everything that we're creating is happening within the Eurorack environment. One of the things this means is that we can roll the tempo today. We can make it slower, we can make it faster. Let's make it a little faster. And everything just sort of stays in sync. We're not using any loops, so we don't have to worry about any tempos clashing with, rolling tempo. Let me take a look at my notes and see if there's anything that we want to add to this. Something else that we could do is run a few more things through the mute module so that I can easily turn them off and on in real time. One of the things we could do would be to, let's see here, take some more of these chords. Brought that to the end and grab another cable. Okay, I can turn the ride off there. We can bring the hi-hats. One of the things that I really like about the mixer that I've chosen as my main mixer for this system is the Hex Mix from Bifaco, is that it has 6 switches, which are Vactral switches and allow you to turn the tracks on and off, but it's not such a distinct start and stop that you get a click ever when you turn the tracks on and off. There are Vactral mutes, which means that the sound itself almost trails out a tiny little bit to make sure you don't get any clicks or pops. And it sounds really seamless and really nice when you mute and turn the tracks back on. But you've only got 6 tracks, so you've only got 6 of those switches to turn the tracks on and off. I wanted to have a little bit more control over how many things I'm able to turn on and off, so I purchased the DivKit's Mutes module, which is literally just 4 inputs, 4 outputs, and 4 switches, so that you can turn other tracks on and off in the same way as the Bifaco Hex Mix. So I'm going to run some more chords through this module so that we can turn them on and off really easily as the groove is progressing. Like this one here, I think. Yeah. Just route this directly in. Cool. Now we've got 3 different sounds on a mute switch. So I can turn on 2 chords and the ride with just 1 click. 2, 3, 4, 2, 2, 3, 4, 3, 2, 3, 4, 4, 2. Turn them on. And this is starting to allow me to control the ebb and flow of what we're creating here. 2, 3, mute it. And I can turn things on and off like this. What let's do is let's do the same thing with our main chord sample. Let's go ahead and run, sorry about that loud explosion there of melodics, but let's run this one through the mute also so that I can turn this sound on and off in real time with just a simple switch rather than having to worry about, trying to figure out where things are routed without having to pick up cables and kind of trace those and figure out which knob or which whatever. We've just got switches that easily allow us to turn things on and off. Okay. So our ride is off, but I can turn it on. And our 3 main chord elements are able to be turned on and off in real time. At this time, I might try to adjust the way the kick drum sounds to try to make it really seat in the mix. Remember from before that we have access to kind of make it a more clicky, punchy kick drum with this envelope control. So I can kind of dial this now. If we want a more chilled sound maybe. Cool. Here we've got a pretty serious groove from scratch that we just put together. We've got control over what we can do with it. We can turn some things on and off. We've got a little bit of a bass line happening here from the Braids module, from Blue Lantern modules, their version of the Braids module. Again, this module, this version of Braids, is running a different firmware than the standard firmware. It has like some speak and spell type speech algorithms that I'm really interested to play with and whatnot. And I'm a really big fan of the Braids oscillator in general from Mutable Instruments. And so to have 2 of them now, absolutely fantastic. Two, three, four. Okay, so I can do a little bit of, turning things on and off, and we can adjust the way things sound a little bit. Let's go ahead and continue on that vibe, and let's make so that we can do a little bit more adjusting in real time to this bass sound. And how I'm going to achieve that is we're going to go ahead and run this into a filter before we run it into the envelope. And we're going to go ahead and use the Mazatron Quad Cutoff filter for this. And what this is it is 4 6 decibel per octave low pass filters. These are absolutely fantastic for taming the high frequency content of a sound. And that's what we're going to be doing with this. We're running our bass line through here before it goes into the envelope. And now, turn quite a few things off there. If we're listening to just the bass line now, I know the reverb is kind of trailing out. Okay, but can you hear that bass line? Now we're going to roll the low pass filter down, and it's really gentle. And it allows us to start sculpting that in real time. All right, let's go ahead and establish our downbeat again, shall we? 2, 3, 4. I'm just listening for that one chord stab. For those of you who are just tuning in, I've got a chord stab that happens on every downbeat of every 4 measures. And that kind of helps us keep, mentally on track and on grid. You don't want to be necessarily, it's fun to create evolving patterns, and it's fun to create evolving rhythmic patterns with Euclidean sequencers and whatnot. But the reality is you need sort of something to anchor down that downbeat so that your audience can groove with you and that your listeners can feel the vibe that you're putting down. So I really like something to anchor down that downbeat. If we think it's happening too often, we could take a different output from our main clock. Right now, I'm triggering that main chord stab from a divided by 64 on our clock, but I could divide that by 128. And now it will trigger every 8 bars. So let's count that out. Wait for the chord. Four, 2, 3, 4, 5, 2, 3, 4, 6, 2, 3, 4, 7, 2, 3, 4, 8. Here it comes, one time. So now we're triggering that downbeat sample every 8 bars instead of every 4 bars. And that's just a matter of preference. If you want maybe more room in the jam for the other chords to evolve, here we go. See how it just kind of helps you feel the vibe? And when you feel when it's coming in. Thank you for sticking around, everyone. How we're starting to have a little bit of control over the ebb and flow of this mix. A few minutes ago, this was an empty patch and there was no cables involved at all. And just a few minutes later, it's been just a little over an hour maybe, and I'm starting to ebb and flow. How I'm following that downbeat, and I was able to put that track right back on right at the count of the downbeat. It helps if you're not super great with following along with the rhythm, if you're constantly counting it out in your head. 4, 2, 3, 4, 5, 2, 3, 4, 6, 2, 3, 4, 7, 2, 3, 4, 8, 2, 3, and hear how the bass line's starting to kind of come back in as I roll the cutoff up? This is what I mean about the ebb and the flow. Four, 2, 3, 4. Bring the ride in. Let's get that. And suddenly, we're just jamming, and we just got ourselves a groove. We've got control over what we can do, with some of these sounds. I like to have sort of a combination of my own sounds and samples, but then being able to use the modules as well, because that way you can roll and morph things in real time and evolve the way they're sounding. Whereas if I had a hi-hat sample and not a hi-hat module, I wouldn't be able to adjust the length like I can here, and I wouldn't be able to adjust the tone or this decay. Chill for a bit. Bring that tempo down, let's groove. When you bring the tempo down, you can roll that reverb up a little. Close down these hats, turn some stuff off, and just keep it in time. So that every, 8 or every 16 bars, maybe you're turning a track on and off and keeping some interest, and you're using that downbeat stab to sort of keep yourself in time. Thanks for sticking around, guys. All right, I appreciate you being with me. Speeding that tempo up. You hear how you can really change the vibe in real time? Tuck this reverb down a little more. Turn on my chords. Definitely need to add a clap to this. Clap. I have the Tip Top Audio 1 sample module here, and I've loaded a whole bunch of clap samples into it. It allows you to load 16-bit 44 kilohertz mono samples, and so we just need a way to trigger this. And let's go ahead and use the third slot of our D&I Pro D&I Pro dot trigger, and we'll just need a way to plug this in to the mixer. Take it out. Come on, so close. Oh, so close. Bear with me here. Come on, clap. Ooh, wait a minute. Oh, that's kind of a neat Euclidean pattern on the clap. Yeah, that's cool, but not really what I was after. Where is that? Okay, come on now. There it is. This sequencer gives me a bit of a time, so thanks for your patience. That's kind of cool. I've got quite a few clap samples on this card, so maybe we'll scroll for another one. That's cool. kind of a cross between house and techno, I think, with these chords coming in and being all chilled. I think that's more house. But I don't really worry about genre so much necessarily with the Eurorack as I do just patching and having a good time. Bring up the reverb a bit here. Don't forget we have all that control over the kick drum, so we can get aggressive with it if we want. Bring that tempo up. That reverb down. It's really fun just kind of messing with the tempo like this, not having to worry about anything at all, being buried in a menu in the Digitact that I can't actually see and put my fingers on immediately. That's the biggest difference without having the Digitact here on the left and programming some of the sounds there. If I want, like say, the rhythmic pattern to change, then I would need to take the time to program another rhythmic pattern and then switch between those patterns in the Digitact, which is all fine and great. A lot of times that's, you know, the way that I really like to work is to program out a lot of things beforehand. But one of the things that's really got me interested in the Eurorack is being able to do so much of this in real time. I know from seeing a lot of interviews and watching a lot of Eurorack producers talking to each other, that I think a common thread in Eurorack is kind of being able to just sort of turn it on and just go. And I think a lot of people don't even really like tune their oscillators or anything, just literally turn it on and start tweaking stuff. Just make sure that it sounds by ear and go. And I just, there's something that's, you know, definitely really powerful about that kind of thinking and about, you know, constructing things in that way. But I find that if I've got some samples put together and, you know, a little bit more like structure beforehand to build some stuff around, that it really helps me personally to create that ebb and flow. I want, you know, to know what key I'm in, and I want to know, you know, that the other oscillators are tuned to that same key, and that, you know, I don't want to just do everything. Oh, it sounds okay, we're doing all right. I mean, I really want to match it to the keys sometimes, and using samples that are already tuned to a key really helps you get the rest of the system in key as well, even though it does take a little bit more time and effort. Five, 2, 3, 4, 6, 2, 3, 4, 7, 2, 3, 4, 8, 2, 3. Here we go now. Of course, the kick drum is now a little bit too beefy, so we can just tame that in real time. Again, if this was a sample, I wouldn't be able to adjust this in real time. I'm changing between whether the kick drum is being created from a sine wave or from a square wave. And certainly I can't do that kind of adjustment to a static sample. So when we establish the rhythm of that first chord sound, we're triggering the rhythm of that using the Mastertron Golden Shower sequencer. And I haven't really done a lot of messing in real time with that, but that's really one of the benefits of using these kind of sequencers, is that once you get real familiar with the rhythm of stuff, you can change it really easily. So here's a different groove for our chords, right? Let's get a different groove on our hi-hats by adjusting the amount of steps on the Euclidean sequencer that's triggering those hi-hats. Maybe we'll make it all 16th notes will trigger for a bit, right? Maybe we'll make it really tight and closed up. I think this is more of a slower groove that we're dialing in, so let's do that. 2, 3, and maybe get a different clap in there. That clap's a little funky now. And by having multiple samples on one of these cards, on one of these SD smart media card, SD flash cards, I can get up to 256 different samples. You can kind of just scroll through until something kind of sounds okay. That's cool. Maybe change the pattern on this. Ooh. Get sort of a Euclidean, you know, rhythm happening on the clap pattern. All right, we've been streaming for just over about an hour and a half. We've created a groove from scratch today. That's pretty versatile. It allows us to move the tempo all over the place and turn tracks on and off in real time and work with the ebb and flow of this track already. Got quite a few modules that we could continue building this patch out if we wanted to keep expanding what we could do. We could run some more modulation to some of these sounds. I think we're going to probably call it today. I really appreciate everyone sticking with me. I believe this is the very first stream. I think this is stream number 7. I believe this is the first stream where I have not had any anomalies in the stream. Everything that we tried to set up, we were able to set up today. I think this is a huge achievement, especially considering that I'm not using any sort of backup rhythmics from or samples from the Electron Digitact, and that we're doing everything inside of the system today. I think that definitely goes to show that I'm advancing and learning a little bit more. All right, good deal. Thanks, Grant. Thanks, Tony. If anybody has any questions at all, music related of any kind, now would be a great time to ask as we're kind of winding up the stream for today. I'm happy to answer any questions that I can that might help you in any situations you might have been having at your home studio. I know things can get a little bit complicated depending on what gear you're using. I have a lot of people asking questions about iPads and routing and audio interfaces, and you can ask questions about the Eurorack if you have questions about the Eurorack as well. Eurorack output volume, why is it louder? You know, that's a fantastic question. I don't actually know the answer to that, but it is definitely louder. Is a definite volume jump. They call it, I'm not sure if it's like Eurorack level versus line level. But we actually have kind of three different, like, sort of audio level standards that I'm aware of. And the first one is consumer audio. And what that means is, like, when you take, like, a headphone jack out of your, portable CD player or portable MP3 player or your older iPad that has a headphone jack, that's a consumer level. It's a consumer grade jack. It's not necessarily meant for professional use. It's just a headphone jack. Plugs into your headphones. That's consumer grade audio. It's not meant for professional applications. And then you have things like synthesizers and drum machines, and the output level that's coming out of those by default is considered line level. I don't really have the mathematics or the numbers for these, but I do know the differences between them. In that consumer grade category, you're not going to get as loud of a sound, and you're definitely not going to get as high quality of a sound, because the adapters and digital to analog converters and whatnot inside of that consumer grade aren't meant for professional audio, so they're not super high quality. Whereas the stuff inside of the gear that is meant for professional audio is going to send you out that line signal, which is a louder signal and a lot more clean signal, and that allows you to get a lower noise floor signal to noise ratio, which is your noise floor, how much noise it's coming through in the recording. One of the interesting things about Eurorack is that it is quite a bit louder, and I have these modules from Strymon, the AA1 module, and they're basically to allow you to take any signal in the case and route that out into a guitar pedal or a line level device. Anything that you can put a line level signal into, and then it allows you to route that back into the case at a Eurorack signal. So I can get, I can kind of cheat and, like, don't worry about running anything out of the case using this module, but just run anything I want into the case using this module. That's the Strymon AA1. And basically, it just, when you take the level out, it takes 18 decibels, negative 18, off of the signal. And when you run the signal in from any device, it adds 18 decibels of gain to get it to the same level as the rest of this stuff. I'm not really sure what that's about, but my goodness, it's definitely something you have to jump a few hurdles to get, your mind around. Ooh, MIDI Bluetooth between two iPads. I actually don't really have any experience trying to MIDI control one iPad using another iPad, especially over Bluetooth. What I've done basically is I'm just using, for every iPad that I want to get into, like, the jam or into a system, I'm using a separate audio interface, and I'm not using any Bluetooth MIDI at all. I'm using the USB IK Multimedia iRig MIDI 2 adapters. I have a video actually on using those with the iPad, and I would probably run two iPads. If it was me, I would probably run two iPads, two audio interfaces, and each audio interface would have one of those MIDI connectors, so that then I could connect the iPads together using 5-pin MIDI. But you'll need two audio interfaces, and you would need two of those iRig MIDI 2s to do it my way. Latency is always a problem. Like, for instance, Bluetooth speakers, like headphones rather, I get asked about a lot, like, what's up with Bluetooth headphones? And the reality is that audio has latency over Bluetooth. There's no, magic solution to that yet. MIDI over Bluetooth is supposed to be getting a lot better. In fact, Roland just came out with some wireless MIDI adapters that literally turn your MIDI signal into a Bluetooth signal, I think, and it connects to the other one wirelessly. So that might be an option as well if you don't want to use cables. But yeah, just from one iPad to another, I don't really have any experience with that way, and I don't know that people are having a lot of success with that Bluetooth wise. Yeah, that sounds awesome. Lo says that he's been enjoying kind of a modular setup by using drum machine apps on one iPad to control synthesizers on another iPad. Yes, that sounds like absolutely some fun times right there. That is the definite kind of chemistry that I'm into. Absolutely. Yeah, I'm still going, Ed. I'm trying to wind it up, but I definitely want to be available to answer any questions. I don't know everything, but I can answer quite a few questions. So I definitely want to be available for that kind of thing in these streams as well. So like, I know a lot of people might have a problem, with their workflow during the week and just kind of can't solve it. Maybe you can come here and ask me. Maybe I can help you move through to that next step and solve that. I definitely want to try to help. Hardwired is the way to go. Yeah, it really is. If you want to be able to rely on those connections, for me personally, I'm not really much into the wireless. I really am a big proponent for just hardwiring things together so that you can really count on them, especially if you're looking to maybe create a setup that you could maybe take someplace else. If you're relying on Wi-Fi or internet of any kind, then you're kind of, limited to whatever Wi-Fi and internet you've got to where you're going. Whereas if you're hardwired, that doesn't make a difference. If, someday COVID's going to be over, people are going to be playing at clubs again, and when that does happen, you want to be as, backed up as possible and make sure that, even if the place you're at has lousy Wi-Fi and lousy internet, that you're still taken care of. Yeah, MIDI over Bluetooth. Oh, but the older iPad may be introducing some of the lag. Yeah, that could be a thing as well. I know that the processors on the newer iPads are getting a lot faster, and definitely some of the older iPads have quite a bit slower processors, and something like that can absolutely have a really big effect on how you're doing it as well. If you're running the applications in AUM on either of the iPads, if you go into the settings in there's some settings on the right-hand side that allow you to make a high, oh gosh, it's not in front of me here, like a high definition, super fast connection. And when you click that, it says, hey, this, may cause some crashes and whatnot. But if you really want that tight connection, that's with minimal latency, that high quality setting really needs to be ticked. And the lower that you can go with your audio buffer inside of without getting clicks and pops in your audio, the lower your latency will be as well. So if you can take the latency down to like 64 or 128 as opposed to 512 or 1028, the lower that number is, the faster your latency is going to be. So if you can, for instance, I don't know like how fast your processors are or how your audio interface keeps up, because that's different for every interface. But if you can get that down to like 64 and set the high quality settings to on, you'll notice right off the jump a whole lot better reaction on latency on all of the devices. But that taxes the iPad a lot more on the CPU. So if you're running a large session in those lower buffer settings might cause a lot of clicks, pops, and cracks in the audio. So you kind of want to set that buffer setting as low as you can, where it's still not creating clicks and pops. And if you can get it down to 64 with that high setting on, you'll be a lot better off. It depends. It depends about the question is, do I record the stereo output? I mean, for the most part, I'm not doing a lot of multi-track stuff these days, either with the iPad or with the Eurorack. For the most part, I'll just create something and then just record the 2-track stereo out. Sometimes I'll run that through Ozone from Isotope to get it a little bit more even and sound the best that I can when streaming. But a lot lately, I've just been sort of normalizing the audio and just getting it really loud and not even taking that extra step. But it definitely depends on sort of how important the project is, on whether I will, do extra stuff to the audio afterwards or not. Usually just a little bit. Even if I do run it through Ozone, it's just like a really gentle, light mastering to help it sound even for streaming. I mean, not for streaming, but for online playback. Hey, you're welcome, Lo. Anything I can do to help, I'm really about helping other people sort of achieve their musical goals. I've been at this electronic music stuff pretty much daily since I was about 21. So for about 26 years, this is really what I've invested my time into on pretty much a daily basis. Even now, I'm still watching lots and lots of tutorial videos on YouTube on things that are, anything from Eurorack to iPads to, producing in Ableton as well. This is what I'm about, and to be able to share what I've learned and help, anyone else overcome like an obstacle or to help you along your musical journey. That's really what I'm about these days. I want to help as many people as possible get to that next level with their tracks and their productions. Yeah, Bluetooth headphones would be pretty amazing if I could ditch the cable. I trip over this quite a bit during these sessions and whatnot, but that latency, I figure if we all, wait long enough, they'll probably get that sorted at some point. I can definitely see, in a few years, something like that maybe coming to more fruition. But I think it's just a matter of, waiting. Right. I think this is the longest stream yet, which is fantastic because the first time with no anomalies today. Everything that we set out to do, we were able to do. I really appreciate everyone joining me for these Eurorack Patch Labs. I think at the end of last week, I said that these are going to be every Saturday. That's a lie. Don't listen to me. These are every Sunday as they've been. Sometimes it's, difficult to avoid some of the faux pas on the live streams. But I'm going to continue doing these every Sunday at 10 a.m. Pacific Standard Time for the foreseeable future. So please continue tuning in. Come with your questions, come with your suggestions, come with your tempo ideas, and we'll see what we can make happen. This is a really large process. I'm trying to create something that will allow me to create, more than just these techno grooves that we've been building. It's definitely what I'm into and kind of what I'm learning to create more and more of. But as we, continue to experiment with these patch labs, we're going to continue pushing different areas and hopefully learning new things as we continue doing this. So I will bid you adieu, and I will say thank you very much for joining, and until next time.